Hey folks, welcome to this episode of the Everyday Millionaire podcast and the Mindset Matters edition, where I'm joined by my wife and Olympic mental performance coach, Steffany Hanlon-Francie. Together, Steffany and I engage in a conversation about different aspects of what we refer to as Mindset Matters. We believe that we're living in and through one of the most impactful global events in history. And let's face it, few have trained for or are equipped to deal with the life that is unfolding before them. The need to pivot in your business, your career, or perhaps deal with shifting family dynamics lies before many. We hope to inspire you to ask yourself questions or pause to consider how you view your world, your life. We'll invite you to check in on where you are on your journey, and are you still clear on your intended destination, or has it changed? Join us for this in our series of Mindset Matters. Listen in, enjoy. Hey folks, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast, the Mindset Matters edition, I guess, the Everyday Millionaire podcast. And I'm joined once again, as always, by Steffany, who is away. You're in Montreal.
I am. I'm 3 hours difference from you, and a couple time zones for sure.
You're hanging out with your team there and doing some cool stuff. So let's kick off with what this particular podcast is about, which is gossip. And this came from when we did the podcast last week around energy leaks, and we mentioned
gossip a couple times. And I think what was hilarious is that people were reaching out and saying, well, what's your definition of gossip? I mean, how is sharing information about other people or talking about or sharing, how is that gossip? And it really got us thinking.
Well, I think there was, at the end of the day, there's people that live in what they consider gossipy environment. They're not happy with it. So we said, okay, well, why don't we dig into it a little bit? We've brought it up in podcasts in the past, and we really haven't dug deep into it. So let's talk a little bit more about gossip. Really, beyond it being a energy leak, it would also create, or often will create, a toxic environment. So when we define gossip, if I'm defining it by my definition, I go to the old saying, if you've got nothing good to say about somebody, don't say anything.
Don't say anything at all.
Yeah. And I've learned that lesson. I've had to learn it more than once. I sometimes wonder if I've still learned it. I trash talk. I trash talk our government, our mighty leader.
But that's not gossip.
I don't think that's gossip.
That's
but
just truth.
That's just, it's my truth anyways. So the point is around gossip is that, number one, it leads to, it can lead to a real breakdown in valuable relationships. And even though your intention may not be that, and breaks down trust. And so gossip is something we have to be cautious about. So when we look at gossip, how do we want to kind of define it or help people define it? Because some people literally don't know they're gossiping. We, within our household, within our realm of friends, know our line around gossip. And so people are pretty aware that they're not going to come in and talk about somebody else's situation, and they're not going to talk about somebody that is not, that we don't know, and that isn't there to have a discussion or defend themselves, or if they're being criticized. So it's interesting, the term gossip and what it really means. But so do you have a bit of a definition for it?
I don't know if I have a definition, but I have a bit of a context, because when I realized that people are sharing information about other people, whether it's positive or negative, they don't actually realize if the person's not there, it's sharing their interpretation of what's going on for that person. And that can create so many different perspectives. And many of them, 99% of them, aren't true. So when we're sharing information, whether it's positive or negative, or good things about other people or bad things about other people, if they're not there to speak their own truth or tell their own story, then technically it's gossip. And I remember saying to somebody just recently, somebody was asking me about what's going on for so-and-so. And I said, well, here's my interpretation, but it's really their story to tell. So what I'm saying to you isn't true. It's their story to tell. And I think what we do is we spend a lot of time sharing our interpretations of other people and what's going on for other people that aren't really true. So we waste a lot of time. We waste a lot of airtime chatting and delaying truth by, BS stories. And that to me is gossip.
Well, and it's often, interpretation of what somebody else said or what their actions were based on what filters you've had and what you're seeing them through without having all of the information. And I go back to, if you don't have something good to say about somebody, just don't say anything. I've over the years just discovered that it's better not to say anything, and of course, I do, I guess, if I see somebody that I admire and they looks like they've achieved something, and I will use that as saying, wow, that was cool. Good for them. I'm inspired by that. I don't consider that gossip yet. In my reality, I'm viewing somebody, but I'm not repeating what somebody else said to me or having conversations that aren't mine to have. I guess that's the biggest
Or
thing
a
is,
judgment. That's the thing, is that if somebody hurts us or pisses us off and we're trying to like do an emotional release of something, and we're criticizing somebody to somebody else, that's gossip.
it's an interesting world that we live in as well because we've been exposed to, certainly public figures particularly in the sports industry, but not just the sports industry. And the reality of it is that what may be normal for us. I'm going to give you a couple of examples about when you've got nothing good to say about somebody, just don't say anything at all. But here's a story that was very interesting: is an old friend of ours that got married on
Machu Picchu.
yeah, Machu
Yeah.
Picchu. And anyways, so I'm in Edmonton. I'm working at the retail store. This was many years ago, by the way. And I'm having this conversation with a friend of mine in the back shop. I have clients out front, but I'm sharing this story about how cool this is. And she's getting married on the mountain. And then we're going to her. She had already been married, and we're going to some kind of a shower and a dinner that night and celebration. And I'm talking about it, and no big deal. I walk out to the front where I had a client, and the client looks at me and goes, "You know her?" I go, "Yeah, we're da da da." He goes, "I'm going to the same party tonight. She's good friends of ours. We're from wherever they were from. I think somewhere in the U.S." But interesting, right? I was just talking about how excited and how cool it was that she got married on a mountain, and it was really awesome. But I'm thinking to myself, how small a world is it
Hmm.
that person, that client, was sitting within earshot, and I'm talking, and if I had nothing negative to say, but I'm thinking to myself, gosh, if I would have been judging about who would get married on a mountain and how much money they must have and all the rest of that, if I would have gone down that path,
Your
my
judgments.
judgment,
Yep.
I'm wondering if that person would have even said anything. That's something that's kind of interesting. But what I've realized in working with, and I don't talk about it anymore because we've worked with sports figures, you particularly, with a coach, a general manager actually, that you traveled with, and I shared something he said to you. You shared it with me. I shared it with somebody else. Nothing happened, but when I told you that I shared it, you got really pissed at me. And this, like I say, folks, this was many years ago. The point is this: that I realized that my gossip elevated me in my world. Look who I know. Right? Look who I've had a
Mm.
look at. I did, I've had conversation with, and Steffany is this, and she worked with that, and it elevated me. So then I shared it. Well, you and I had a very big conversation
Heated.
about heated, but no, but you made some really good points, right? So that world was very normal to us, yet we had people that were sharing information that was not for public consumption. As a matter of fact, it was anything but for public consumption. They shared it with us as a discussion, as a what's your view, what's your opinion, but that was a real normal world for us, whereas for many that was like, holy cow, you're talking to them, you're talking to him, you're talking to her. My point was is that I learned a very valuable lesson, and that had to be like well over 20, maybe 25 years ago that I learned that lesson. But the point of it is that really today, you and people can talk to us and go, did Patrick tell you or did Steffany tell you? And I go, yeah, no, no.
Nope.
Am I supposed to know something? Because we don't even tell each other. We don't even talk with each other. And part of that
Well,
was
we
why.
do, and we do, and I think that's what the trust around our intimacy is that I know that I can share with you what's going on with me. I can tell you the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs, the heartbreaks, the celebrations, the joys, and you're not going to go out and tell your buddies when you have a beer. Like, to me, that's an intimacy that I can trust. And when I know that you're not going to share that or gossip with that, or I know that our household is not going to take what's going on in our home out to the public and share that. To me, that allows me to grow, that allows me to share, it allows me to stretch into what's next. But what I've discovered over the last little while, in the last 10 or so years, is that there are people that don't have that same value system, is that they would rather look for things that make you vulnerable and then go out and share that, even with people you don't know. And to me, that's gossip. And that to me is an energy leak. And it doesn't move people's life forward in the way that we can make a difference in the world, in the community. When we get stuck in that cycle of sharing negativity or other people's vulnerabilities because it makes us elevate, to me, that is completely not okay.
Yeah, so I think, I don't profess to know the psychology behind it. I know what it was for me was that as I reflected on those years and that time and those lessons learned, it really was about understanding that it have elevated me in the eyes of others. I think that's what drove it.
You
And
think it did, though. You think it did. I don't know if it did.
well, I don't know if it did either. I'm just saying is that what I don't know what was behind it other than I quit doing it many years ago and I don't have that same kind of drive to talk about other people that aren't in the same room. Now, we share the story and then I want to keep digging into this, to give context for gossip folks is that sometimes we don't know that we're gossiping. At the end of the day, many don't know. We have a no gossip rule in our own household. The people closest to us and friends know that. We don't talk about it. And that's just the way it is. And so it's really forces you to have intelligent conversation. You better be well read. You better be up to speed on what's going on in the world. You have to have a conversation about things that matter that don't involve people that aren't there. And it changes the dynamic when you're not having negative conversations about somebody else. And we celebrate others. If somebody says, well, did you hear? And it's a mutual friend. Did you hear what they did? They pulled it off. They had a big win. That's awesome. I don't consider that gossip. It's just sharing information of somebody else's win. So this goes back many years ago. You were working with a hockey team. I share this story about gossip because I think it's something that really how big a stand can you take? And Steffany was working for this particular hockey team. It was Christmas. We went over to the general manager's house or the owner's house. I don't remember. And anyways, we were talking and we were all sitting around. There was a group and
there was a snowstorm. So no, not everybody was showing up at the same time.
Yeah, not everybody was showing up at the store, which left us having a conversation and drinks with this group of individuals who were the management team.
That we didn't really know.
Didn't know them well, that's for darn sure. It's also that's interesting about environment and culture. That's a different conversation. The point is they started talking about this particular individual on the management team, a very prominent position that he had, and they were just trash talking him, and they were just like it was like going around the room, and everybody was taking a shot at this guy. And so it finally got to Steffany, and now I didn't know these guys virtually at all. And, I'd maybe met them once before. Steffany knew them far better than I did, of course, because she was working with them. But ultimately, this whole round of trash talking this particular individual came to Steffany. And somebody said, well, I think it was one of the owners said, so what do you think, Steffany, of blah, blah, blah? And you stood up and you go, I don't know. He's not here to defend himself. I don't know why we're talking about this. I'm leaving. And you got up and you walked away.
I grabbed my purse.
And you left. And so I was sitting there going, okay, I don't know what just happened, but I'm with her and she's got the car. So we ended up leaving that night. I was incredibly embarrassed. And, although I was proud of the stand you took later, in the moment I went, do you realize what you just did? You know who those people were and what you just did? And you were very clear. You go, that was gossip. That was bullshit. That they had no way. There was nothing good that they were saying, and there was no purpose of that conversation. Now,
even if it was true, I didn't care. In that moment, there was no point. The fact that, I didn't know if any of it was true, to be honest. And I didn't know. All I knew in the feeling in my body was, this is not okay. And I don't want to be associated. And you know what? I may put my career at risk. I may put our, social relationships at risk. But in that moment, and I knew I trusted you that you would, I don't know, it was just an instinct. I knew in that moment, and I didn't know before that, that gossip was never going to be okay with me in business or personal.
Well, what's interesting about it is that we've learned over the years, because we've spent a lot of time thinking about this and having conversations about this whole thing around gossip. And what's interesting about it is that in some environments and in some relationships, it's interesting. And I've been there, I've probably been at the effect of it, people gossiping about me or people gossiping about you, no doubt. We don't know about it, so it doesn't, I guess it doesn't
Of
bother
course
me.
we do.
Yeah, well, we don't necessarily know all about it. But once again, it's we get information backdoor, like going, "What the hell?" But the point is this: is people you call your friends, and then you think they're friends, and they are friends, but in their world of friendship, it's okay to gossip about you when you're not in the room. In my world, that is not okay, and yet for others, it's like, well, just a friend. We're just like, yeah, I love him or I love her, but I mean, we're just joking. We're just kidding. No, you're not. You're gossiping about it, and you got to quit it. So this really, in this context of this particular conversation, what I would encourage our listeners to do is bring your attention to the conversations that you're listening to, that you're participating in, or perhaps that you're inadvertently being the person that is gossiping about somebody who's not in the room, that you may even consider a friend. And why do you need to share that information at all? What is the purpose of it? And I think it's a good question to kind of consider.
No, I agree. And, I think those are the lessons back in the day, is that, do these conversations move something forward? Do they change? Are they kind? Are they practical? Are they, do they make a difference in the world, or are they just an energy leak? Are they sucking energy, and are they giving you a distraction because you don't want to talk about what's really going on in your life? And that's the thing, is that if we don't have the courage to do our own work and then share and trust and commit and risk to be real in our worlds, because we think people are going to gossip about us, then that's really scary. So I think if we take a stand and step back and go, you know what, I want to be around people that I can actually be real with, that I can tell the truth with, I can be vulnerable with, because what's happening in the world right now is not 100% safe. We have to know, that we can risk and share things and take a chance and put ourselves out there. And if people are going to share that information, share it in a way that moves the world forward, not that tears people down.
It's interesting that, it's a good point. And I think that, to give some context and some tools, that listeners can take forward, I think there's a fundamental rule that has to be, if you are talking about somebody, it has to be in a way that elevates them. Full stop. If you can't elevate that person that you're having, that somebody's brought your attention to, or that you're bringing their attention to, then just don't have the conversation. Don't talk about it. Full stop. The other, I have been in situations, and this is something that I think is easy to fall into, where you're with a group of 2, 3, 5, whatever number of people, and a name comes up, and ultimately somebody looks to you for an opinion, and you may have a very strong opinion about that person, but do you need to share it? Not really. You have to consider, is that, is it by consensus they're an idiot? Is it because you've added to it that makes it even worse? What is the point, or what is the value in you being critical of somebody who isn't there to either defend it? And if they're not there, you're not getting the whole story. You only have your view of it, and that's probably second or third hand conversation, or second or third hand conversation or information. But the other question is, even if you're the direct person, why do you need to share it? Be very, very clear about that. And I've been in a situation before where that has come around to me, and certainly over the past few years, what has showed up for me is, rather than have a negative thing, is I go back to a really simple answer, which is, I just don't share those values of that individual. They have a set of values that I don't align with. So quite frankly, I don't hang out with them, and I don't see it their way, but they're going to do what they do. And it's just, I try and take a high road of not trash talking somebody, and especially you be very, very, not especially, I mean, just don't do it, is the best way to handle those situations.
I think, that's a really good point. Is like you think about trash talking somebody, what do you get out of it? What do you really like? Think about it. What do you get out of saying negative things about somebody, trash, when you really don't ever know the whole story? My mom always said, other people's opinion of me is none of my business,
Yeah.
because it's a waste of time. When you are like, what are you really gaining out of it? I mean, life is short. We really don't know. Here's the rule. I learned this from a big time guy in USA Hockey. He said, "Here's the thing: you never, ever, 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 ever 5 times know what's going on for another human being, for another person. So the minute you start talking about people like you know what's going on because you've had a 5-minute conversation, or maybe you've had dinner with them and you've had an experience, or something's happened in a split second of time or a slice of time for them. You don't know what's going on. How dare you? So when I, go with people and I'm hearing people talk about other people that I don't know, I gently walk away. I mean, I didn't at that hockey party. I like got up, grabbed my purse, put on my boots and left. And I felt bad for you, but I didn't, that wasn't a conscious thing. It was something that pulled me out of that conversation. It's like, and in that moment, I knew that no gossip was one of my highest values because it doesn't serve anyone.
And it's a very tricky and slippery slope. And sometimes we have to be either reminded or, yeah, it's helpful if you're reminded, if you go down that path, or if you find yourself going down that path, just change the path and change the conversation, if you will. So,
And what's really fun about when you say that, I just want to before we wrap this up, is that I look about, our household, our business partners, the people. I'm in Montreal right now. All we talk about is how we can elevate other people, how we can create what's next, what's new, how we can change the world. That's our conversations. And we're building something. I think of Rain, I think of you and JG, and I think of the people that we've surrounded ourselves with in the last 6, 8, 10, 12 months, is that all we're doing right now is, I mean, we've done this over the last 10 years, but how do we make people's lives better? How do we make a difference? And you know what? To me, that's inspiring. We don't spend any time talking about other people's business. And to me, I closed that energy leak.
well, it really is a distraction, isn't it? And so, for this particular conversation today, folks, is that really bring yourself and hold yourself to account. It is easy to slip into that world of a gossip. Maybe you find yourself in an environment where people are gossiping. Are you able to, change the conversation? Are you able to bring it to the attention of the individuals that are gossiping, and really start to ask yourself, why do I want to go down this path of being critical of somebody, of minimizing somebody in their life, and
And trying
realize,
to elevate yourself, maybe.
well, that's generally, I think that's just my opinion. That's just anecdotal. I have no data
Mm.
to support that. But the point of it is that I can tell you that, many years later, that when you stay out of that toxicity of negative conversations about other people, and believe me, I've got lots of reasons in the past to have those conversations, but I just don't go there anymore. The team doesn't go there anymore, and it's just kind of the way we go, because it doesn't serve us, and we know that, and so we just keep carrying on, keep on keeping on, as they say, and gossip isn't part of that conversation. So, as we wind this down, I think, if I'm going to do a quick summary of it, pay attention to who you're talking about, what you're having to say about them. Is it really important that you're having this conversation with anybody about another person? Is it lifting them up, elevating them, making them sound like rock stars, or is it actually minimizing them and putting them in the pit? Ask yourself that question, and then ask yourself, how can you stop it, and or stop somebody else at it, and not have somebody else be at the effect of it? That would be definitely something to consider this week. And Stephanie, I want to give a book of the week.
Okay. Which one?
Well, because I've actually listened to
Oh,
it
The
twice.
Gap. Oh, I know.
The
I know.
Gap
I'm
and the
halfway
Gain.
through.
The Gap and the
Gap and the
Gain.
Gain.
Gap and the Gain, and such a great book. and it's written Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. So
Dan Sullivan.
I mean, he's a legend. The guy's like 79 years old. You'd think he's 50. Anyways, amazing. And the book, The Gap and the Gain, is just so awesome. And it actually speaks a little bit to this conversation in terms of, if you're gossiping, you are definitely living in the gap, and there's something to get out of.
To consider. Yeah. And think about the gap versus the gain. Like, hang out in the gap and it's a downward spiral, but look at what you're gaining even when things are negative. Man, oh man.
To each of our segments, I think we're going to add a book, that we want to shine a light on. Anyways, folks, that is the Everyday Millionaire Mindset Matters podcast. Gossip, quit it. We all got to quit it. We all got to be guarded about it. And Steffany, thanks a lot.
Thanks, son. That was fun. I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. No, really.
You don't have to say that.
Really. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.